Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Portion Perfection Weight Management Series. My name is Amanda Clark. I'm an advanced accredited practicing dietitian and the author creator of Portion Perfection, an easy system for managing how much you eat for the benefit of weight management based on facts, not fads. Today, I want to focus on eating and obesity medications. I'm seeing a lot of people starting on the injectable drugs and then not continuing for a variety of reasons. A Cleveland Clinic study showed that only 19% of people prescribed the new anti-obesity medications were still using them 12 months later. And that's in the US, where there's better supply than we have in Australia. Many people aren't sure about them, and some are wanting to get their hands on some. So I thought it was an opportunity to talk about them. Today, we'll discuss how they work, the risks and benefits, the access, dietary strategies that work well with them, side effects, where bariatric surgery fits in, and I've had some questions submitted also prior to this presentation, so I'll make sure we answer them along the way or at the end. We've got a great giveaway cookbook at the end, so stay for the details. So let's get started. I'm going to limit my discussion to the new drugs, which are technically GLP-1 agonists. Now, there have been many GLP-1 agonists for many years amongst the diabetes medications, but some of them didn't result in very much weight loss, so it was almost unrecognizable. So I'm going to be focusing on the ones that do result in significant weight loss. Now, GLP-1 is a naturally occurring hormone. It's called glucagon-like peptide, and it's produced by cells in the intestine in response to food intake. In fact, it's mainly triggered by the presence of nutrients at the very end of your small intestine, which is referred to as your ileum. It's broken down pretty quickly. And the little diagram here aims to show you what an agonist is, because they're GLP-1 agonists. So the little brown molecules are the natural version of GLP-1, and chemical messengers work on receptor sites. So it's like you put a key in the door. If it fits correctly, then you get the action of the door opening. So here you can see that the natural chemical, the little brown one, fits perfectly into the receptor site for GLP-1. Then we've got the blue molecules, which are similar enough to reach the bottom of that receptor site and act like a key, but it's not actually the natural chemical. The top of it is different, but the top of it is not required to fit into the receptor site. So that's an agonist, something that triggers the same response. So it kind of adds to the presence of GLP-1. So it's not exactly the same chemical though. So the opposite of that would be an antagonist, which blocks the receptor site. So it doesn't trigger the action because here it can't reach the bottom of the receptor site, and it stops the natural chemical being able to react with that receptor site because it's engaged with the antagonist. So the anti-obesity medications we're talking about are Liraglutide, which is Saxenda, and it's been around for quite a while, and it generally results in about a 9% reduction in body weight. So, for example, that's going from 100 kilograms to 91 kilograms. And for those who are listening in pounds in the US, there's 2.2 pounds to a kilogram. But it's nice to use a round number. So I'm going to refer to kilograms so you've got a bit of an idea. But 100 kilograms is about 220 pounds. So it's going from 100 kilograms to 91 kilograms in its simplest form. It's a daily injection, and you need to keep taking it to maintain the weight loss. Semaglutide is Wegovy for weight loss, and we don't yet have that in Australia. We do have Ozempic, which is lower dose of the same drug, Semaglutide, which is approved for diabetes. Comparisons suggest that weight loss seen in Ozempic at a 1 milligram dose are around 7%, or Wegovy at a much higher dose, so at 2.4 milligrams of the same drug but under a different name, you can get 17% of your body weight loss. So that would be going from 100, losing 17 kilos down to 83. Then we've got tirzepatide, which is both a GLP-1 agonist, like the other two, but it also contains another substance, which is a GIP agonist. And GIP is another appetite-suppressing hormone called glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide. It's produced in the beginning and the middle of the small intestine in response to food intake. And that is Zepbound for weight loss, with a reported loss of 27% at 18 months, or Mounjaro for diabetes. So again, is a lower dose, and reports suggest that it achieves 20% with this combination of the GLP-1 and GIP. We won't see Zepbound in Australia for some time. We do have some Mounjaro for diabetes. To put these weight changes into perspective, bariatric surgery typically results in the loss of about 35%, sometimes more weight at 12 months. And then by 5 years out, there's been some weight regain, and we're at maybe 26%. For some, it may be as low as 12%, but 26% would be common. Bariatric surgery works through changes to appetite-suppressing hormones, which starts to taper off over time, starting from about the 1 year, and also the smaller stomach, which helps to trigger receptors to release some satisfaction hormones after only a small quantity of food. And also the bariatric surgery produces changes to gut bacteria. Now, in the pipeline, there's a lot more drugs, building on the success of what's been seen in the trials so far. So in the pipeline, there's one called Liraglutide, which is a combination of 3 hormones, and it has a very strong impact on reducing appetite, but also removing fat from the liver. It has the addition of glucagon, and glucagon kind of works opposite to insulin. So glucagon is released by the pancreas normally, and it affects the liver, and it tells the liver to release some glucose. So the liver will be using its glucose store in the form of glycogen to release, but it will also convert some fat, some liver fat, into glucose and release that as well. So that's looking quite promising, but not available yet. So liraglutide and semaglutide, so that's Saxenda and Wegovy or Ozempic, they're very similar, so 90% similar to our own GLP-1. They've both been modified, though, to last longer. So the way the drug gets broken down is there's another enzyme that then destroys it. So it gets to the opportunity to react with the receptor sites, and then after a short period of time, it's destroyed. And that's what enables your levels to go up and down fairly swiftly. So with these two drugs, they're slightly different. So the enzyme that breaks them down doesn't break it down quite so readily. So it gets to hang around for longer. So the drug binds with our own GLP-1 receptor sites in various parts of our body. So in the brain, it acts on our satisfaction, so our feeling of satisfaction. In the gut, it slows down the movement through the intestine. So we've got a longer period of time to recognize that there's food there. And that will also have some effect on appetite. And then in the pancreas, it increases insulin secretion. So that's why these drugs are very important for people with diabetes. It really improves their blood glucose control, which helps to resolve some of the problems that come down the track from diabetes. So let's have a look at some of the results of the key trials. Now, this one is called the SCALE trial, which looked at weight rather than diabetes, and it included over 3,000 patients with a high body weight who didn't have diabetes. They took Liraglutide, so Saxenda. So to put this in perspective, someone in the trial who was 100 kilograms, on the placebo, they reduced their weight to 97 kilograms. So those on the placebo will have still received some dietary advice, probably a recommendation for a 500 calorie calorie deficit, so a weight reducing diet. And those on the drug who everything else was the same in the trial except that they got the real drug rather than the placebo, their weight reduced from 100 kilos to 90 kilograms over the space of a year. So it looks like the lowest point was hit at about the 12-month mark, but the trial went on for a little longer than that. Then there have been multiple step trials, which are using semaglutide, so Ozempic or Wegovy, depending on the dose that they've used. Step 1 had around 2,000 people at higher body weight and without diabetes. So this was really about Wegovy. And that 100 kilo person on the placebo, again, ended up at about 98 kilograms. And the 100 kilo person on semaglutide ended up at 84 kilograms. So that was 16% of body weight lost. And you can see that it tends to occur that about the 12-month mark, things level out. So the biggest issue with these medications is actually that you need to keep using them to maintain the weight loss, which really is no different to a blood pressure medication. If you take a blood pressure medication, it resolves the high blood pressure. But if you were to stop it, the high blood pressure returns. You need to keep taking the antihypertensive or high blood pressure medication. So although everybody feels as though if they could just get the weight down, then they'd be able to be more active and they could eat for weight maintenance, but it's just too hard to eat for weight loss. But you can see here that with semaglutide, after 20 weeks, that 100 kilo person was 89 kilograms. And then some people were switched to placebo without their awareness, and their weight increased to 95 over the next 12 months, whilst those who remained on semaglutide reduced to 83 kilograms. So this is the problem that we're seeing with supplies running out or restrictions being placed on who can access the drugs. It's seeming like a waste of money to have done the first 20 weeks there if there's going to be weight regained. It's not completely clear, though, whether there's 100% weight regain or there is some level of resetting of the set point, meaning that the weight that your body tends to go up and down around is lower than it used to be. So we can certainly see, though, that the drug works. So just an overview of current supply issues for Australia and the US. Well, the pharmaceutical company that supplies Ozempic, which is Novo Nordisk, has recently advised the TGA and the Ozempic Medicine Shortage Action Group that supply throughout 2024 will be limited. They advised that demand had accelerated in recent months, particularly for the low dose. So that is people being prescribed. Everybody starts on the lower dose and starts to increase as they gain tolerance. So this additional demand is caused mainly by off-label prescription, and that means that Ozempic is the only Novo Nordisk semaglutide available, and it's only approved for diabetes. So whilst doctors can prescribe it for weight control, that's considered to be off-label, which they're allowed to do. So the TGA advises prescribers do not start new patients on Ozempic unless there are no suitable alternatives or there is a compelling clinical reason to do so. And that includes people with diabetes. So not just off-label, but the suggestion that we wait and we let the people who are already on it be able to continue so that they don't get that waste of money effect. So for patients who are already prescribed Ozempic, consider if they can be changed to an alternative, as continuous supply cannot be guaranteed. Supplies should be conserved for patients who are stabilised on Ozempic who have no other treatment options. It's not known when the medicine will be available in sufficient quantities to meet the ongoing high demand. Novo Nordisk advised that very limited new supplies of Ozempic at the lower doses would be available, and there would be intermittent supply of all strengths of Ozempic throughout 2024. So again, the government can't stop doctors from writing prescriptions off-label, but pharmacies have also been encouraged to limit the filling of the scripts, and that is occurring, and I'm hearing of that regularly. So having seen what happens when you get a break in your supply, I think we need to be patient. And there's still no launch date yet for Wegovy for Australia. Now, looking at the risks and benefits, I'm going to say that I'm not a doctor, and the focus of this presentation is what to eat. So I'll just say that there are cautions and precautions around pancreatitis, thyroid cancer, cardiovascular disease, and for those people with kidney disease. There are also very positive things for cardiovascular disease and kidney disease. So these are things to discuss with your doctor, not me. The main one there that is relevant to me is the muscle loss. So let's have a look at that. Now, some of the trials that we looked at the graphs for have included a subset of those people having body composition tests done using DEXA scans, dual X-ray absorptiometry, which is what is used for bone density scans. It can also measure body composition. So they're usually only done on smaller proportions. They're not usually done on the full kind of 3,000 people who are in the group, but there might be 30 that it gets done on. Data generally suggests that normally if you're 100 kilos and you lose 10 kilograms just through lifestyle change, so diet and exercise, then 7.5 kilos of that body weight change will be body fat, and 2.5 kilos will come from your lean body mass. Now, lean body mass is everything except the fat. So it is your muscles, bones, organs, connective tissue, and water. So that's what I've shown here. Typical, out of 10 kilos of loss, 7.5 is fat, and that's what I've shown in yellow. Out of the lean body mass, the two main components that change or reduce when you lose weight is just the muscle and the water. You don't generally lose any bones or any connective tissue. It's only muscle and water. And out of that lean body mass or muscle and water loss, for every kilo of muscle you lose, you generally lose a litre of water. That would be typical because that water was actually hydrating that muscle. So when you gain a kilo of muscle, you tend to gain 2 kilos in weight because it's 1 kilo of muscle, 1 litre of water, and the same when you lose. So in the example of losing 10 kilograms, it would typically be 7.5 kilos of body fat and then 1.25 kilos of muscle and 1.25 litres of water. In my practice, I aim for no more than 10% of weight loss to come from muscle. We use in-body body composition analyzers in clinic, and when we see people via telehealth, we encourage them to go to a site that has an in-body body composition analyzer and have a test and send us the results so we can base our advice on that data. So in my clinic, there would be 8 kilograms of body fat, at least, maybe more, and 1 kilo or less of muscle loss, and 1 litre of water. In the anti-obesity medication trials, they found that from 10 kilograms weight loss, there was 2 kilograms muscle loss, or 20%. So 6 kilograms of body fat, 2 kilograms of muscle, and 2 litres of water. So whilst there hasn't been trials to prove whether we can actually counterbalance that, the suggestion would be that when you start these medications, that you also ensure that you have a resistance training program and you ensure sufficient protein intake. So to ensure sufficient protein intake, I use 1.1 grams of protein per kilogram ideal body weight, and I regularly see zero muscle loss using that. So I know that it doesn't need to be any more than that for the general population. Occasionally there might be somebody who is more prone to muscle loss, but it also may depend on how much resistance exercise they're undergoing. But in the presence of good resistance exercise, 1.1 grams of protein per kilogram ideal body weight works pretty well. And that'll be, for women, that could be 70 to 85 grams of protein per day. And for men, it might be 80 to 95 grams of protein per day. I also find that that level works well with my bariatric patients. So even losing large amounts of weight, 1.1 grams of protein is working well in my practice. But for anti-obesity medications, there's not enough data yet to know, is that going to work? But that would be my suggestion. So I wanted to show you a couple of examples of actual figures from body composition testing. Now, this is a lovely client of mine who underwent gastric bypass back in 2016. And these are her body composition results. So we can see what has happened to her muscle mass. So I'll call her atypical. So she had a great result. So she's 5'7" or 170 centimeters. And I've listed here her annual results with her weight change, her muscle reading, and her body fat reading. So you can see this is really valuable to have body composition testing done along the way. So her initial weight was about 111 kilograms, and by the end of year 1, which is usually the lowest point, she was at 71.4. So she'd lost about 40 kilograms. From there, you can see her weight did go down a little bit further and then started to increase. She was able to get it down again, and now we're back at about the 80, which reflects typical kind of weight regain down the track from bariatric surgery. The research would say that you can expect a regain of about 20% over the following 7 years on average. So some people regain more, some people regain less. This was a fairly typical outcome. In this case, there's 8 kilograms over the following 7 years, and that's pretty much 20%. So 40 kilos lost, 20%, about 8 kilograms. The next line there is the muscle mass, and she did really well. So this is what makes her amazing. And this is because she got quite serious about resistance training. She'd been quite fit in her past, and her body remembered how to do it. She enjoyed it, and she was pretty dedicated to it. You can see that she started with 29.8 kilograms of muscle, and by the 6-year mark, she actually had greater strength or greater muscle mass than it took to carry her original weight. So the extra 30 to 40 kilos around with her. So my point here is that it's quite possible to lose no muscle mass, even when there's very large weight losses. But as I tell this client, she is exceptional. So for this lady, at the 6-year mark, she had lost about 33 kilograms, which is 30% of her body weight. So that ties in with those bariatric surgery figures that I gave earlier. And 34.7 kilograms of fat loss out of 33 kilograms weight loss. So actually 105% of her weight loss was body fat, Well done. Now, here's another client's results. This lady had a bypass 3 years ago, and I chose her just because her weight was pretty much right on the 100 kilo mark, so it kind of fits with the figures that I've been discussing. So overall, at 1 year, there was a loss of 31.5 kilograms. So that's 31.5% of body weight, 2.6 kilograms of muscle mass, which was 8.2% of the weight lost, and 27.5 kilograms of body fat. So that was 87.3% of the weight lost. If we think about the proportions of body fat I showed you on that yellow, red, and blue bars, typical was 75%. So 75% in the research, 80% in my clinic, and it was only 60% with the anti-obesity medications. So for this lady, it was 87.3%. So a very good result. By 3 years, though, this lady has lost more muscle, and the amount of fat relative to her total loss at that time is now 75%. So it's similar to that typical level as we get out a few years. When I look at her notes, I can see that there were some issues that will have resulted in that weight regain, but life happens to people. And this is a client who's on Ozempic. You can see that in the first month, his weight went from 203.6 to 202.2. So he just lost 1.4 kilos. And he actually gained some muscle in that first month. And then over the longer term, so I've got him there for 9 months, he's lost 16.4 kilos in weight, of which 3.2 kilos of that is muscle, which is 20%. So that ties in with the anti-obesity medication figures. 11.5 kilos of his loss, which is 70%, is body fat, with the remainder water. So we're certainly trying to combat that loss with resistance training and protein intake, but he's at quite a high body weight, and there are a few other issues which impede him from doing sufficient resistance training. But yeah, we'll be certainly getting some more input now that we've reflected on and identified this higher muscle mass loss. So you can see that we can control the muscle loss with bariatric surgery, and part of the effect of bariatric surgery is an increase in the natural production of GLP-1 and other changes in hormones. So it remains to be seen what's causing this more rapid loss in muscle on the anti-obesity medications and how we get around that. Let's take a quick look at, for those who are about to start anti-obesity medications, here's a little chart of the symptoms and the best strategies for controlling that. So when you start on an anti-obesity medication, you start on a very small dose and you gradually increase it month by month to an appropriate dose to get the best outcome. The symptoms or the side effects will include fullness, because that's what it's trying to do. So for those who are struggling to eat, and I regularly see clients who seek me out because they've started an anti-obesity medication. Yay, this is great. I haven't got much appetite. And then, a couple of months down the track, they recognize, oh, well, gee, all I'm doing now is skipping meals. I've got a really poor diet. Now I need some help. So my best advice is to go for small, frequent serves of nutritious foods. We can go for things that are denser so that they take up less space. You might find that nutritious liquids can help at this stage. Shakes can be good, but also shakes are quite good at stimulating the release of natural GLP-1. But they do sit for a shorter period of time in the stomach. So it can relieve some of that stomach discomfort and nausea. The other things to do about nausea is to go for cold foods, because often you'll find that the aromas of hot foods are stronger. So the aromas of cold foods are generally milder, and lower fat foods are also better because the aromas and the taste is not as strong. And ginger can also be helpful, either ginger tablets or ginger tea. Vomiting can occur. If this is severe, then I would certainly consider a rehydration fluid like Hydrolyte from the pharmacy. Talk to your doctor about whether anti-nausea medication may help get you through that stage if it's a significant side effect. Bloating is commonly described, and it's also something that you tend to settle into. Best way to settle this down is to limit starchy carbohydrate foods temporarily. We want to get them back in there further down the track to keep healthy gut bacteria. But you could focus on meat, avocado, and low-starch vegetables like salads or stir-fries during that running-in period. Gas, well, that's also likely to be contributed to by carbohydrate foods. So a temporary reduction in those until the symptoms settle. And if you notice a particularly strong smell, you might benefit from limiting eggs during that period of time, because certain gut bacteria produce sulfur gases. Constipation is probably the most common side effect. So what we want to do about constipation is ensure that there's sufficient fluid intake. And sometimes this high level of GLP-1 not only reduces your appetite, but may reduce your fluid intake as well. So you want to be conscious of that and use strategies to ensure you still consume 2 litres of fluid per day. You want to maximize your intake of low starch vegetables, so broccoli, carrot, cauliflower, those sorts of things. You could incorporate fruits that help with the bowels, like pears, prunes, or kiwi fruit. Pear juice can be quite useful. And we still need some high fiber foods to try and regulate what's going on in your gut. And you also need to walk regularly to improve movement through your bowel. As far as the high fiber foods go, you might feel most comfortable to use something like wheat dextrin, like Benifiber. It's not a fermentable fiber, so it's not one that's feeding good gut bacteria, but that also means that it's not causing any bloating. But what it does do is it holds some fluid in the bowel, stopping it from being reabsorbed, so maintaining a softer stool. So very good for that, very easy to consume. It's not overly filling. It doesn't have a taste. You could put in water and you wouldn't know it's there. So very useful. And diarrhea is perhaps less common than constipation, but it certainly happens. I think the research shows about 8% of people during the Ozempic trials experienced diarrhea, but more like 30% in the Wegovy trial. So with the higher dose, this happens more frequently. So with that, the soluble fiber like Benifiber can also help, because it will absorb some of that excess fluid to make a more formed motion. And I would also reduce or limit caffeine and alcohol, because they can also cause a bit of a spasm of the intestine, which, if there's already something bubbling away there, it'll just speed it through faster. So hopefully that gives you a bit of assistance. So the dietary strategies to complement anti-obesity medications. Well, the most important thing is that it's flexible to suit the individual. It's like, don't bother starting any dietary plan that is impractical to do forever, because it'll, just like taking the medications for a short period of time and giving up, so will the dietary change. It can't really be just a fixed, here it is diet, or else you will only follow it for a short period of time. Ideally, it's high in protein to combat that muscle loss. So again, I'm aiming for 1.1 grams per kilogram ideal body weight. I would say if we wanted to go higher than that, I would choose to go higher by adding a protein supplement rather than changing the dietary protein intake, because the more protein you eat by diet, the less space there is for foods containing significant fibre. It needs to be nutrient dense, and we'll talk more about the value of that in a moment. Particularly if you're not feeling like eating much, we really want the quality of the amount of food that you do eat to be really positive, because there's a whole lot of substances in food that have beneficial effects on our health that in all different ways that are not particularly relevant to weight. But there still must be a caloric deficit. So portion control is key, and also mindful eating can help with that. So on top of that, resistance training, not a dietary strategy, but certainly really important to ensure that a high or as high a proportion as possible of your weight loss is body fat and not muscle. So we saw before that you can stop muscle mass during rapid weight loss, like bariatric surgery, and we don't know yet if you can stop it to the same extent on anti-obesity medications. Time will tell. I'm not an exercise physiologist, but I would certainly say that to stop muscle loss during rapid weight loss, resistance exercise 3 times a week, something for the arms, something for the legs, something for the core, it would be the strategy to go for. As far as dietary prescription goes, I really think the best place to start is with a Portion Perfection starter pack, because I've put everything I know into there and it perfectly fits what we're looking for to go with anti-obesity medications. Worst case scenario, if the effect of the anti-obesity medication is really strong and you're really struggling to eat the volume that I've prescribed for general weight loss, then going for the bariatric plan will reduce that volume. With the bariatric plan, I'd probably recommend that you take a general multivitamin. You don't need a bariatric multivitamin if you haven't had bariatric surgery. If you have had bariatric surgery, you do, because there's a difference. So in the starter pack, you get the book. So this one's for people who have not had bariatric surgery. And this is the Australian pack. So you get the purple book, which is the whole eating plan. So it shows you all the options for breakfast, all the options for snacks, all the options for lunches and dinners, and how much. It also gives you the plate and bowl that you see in the pictures, so that you know that you're getting the quantity the same as in the pictures. And it also gives you the Australian Healthy Snack Bible, which is a pocket guide that helps you to find the better products in the supermarket. I won't go through everything about Portion Perfection because a lot of people here are already aware, but I'll just refer you to the website, particularly to the starter pack. The starter pack also comes with a couple of educational sessions from me, which cover more about all the facets that go into healthy weight control and how to use the Portion Perfection products and what else is available. So the plate has 2 serving sizes. Weight loss for women is just filling the base. Weight loss for men is out to the edge, 2 centimetres or 3/4 of an inch deep in the middle. In the US, we don't have the Healthy Snack Bible, so our starter pack would include the 4-week weight loss menu plan, which is also available in Australia. It goes with either the bariatric or the weight loss versions, and it gives you recipes as well as tells you what to eat for every moment of the day. And here's the equivalent bariatric kit for Australians and for the US. You can also see there we've been selling on Amazon in the US for about 7 years now, and the average star rating of our products is 4.8 out of 5. So people are pretty happy with what we do. So if you can't get the medication, or you don't want the medication, or you choose to stop the medication, what's the best dietary approach then? So I'm going to get a little bit technical over the next couple of slides. And some people really like to gain an understanding of the reasoning, and others just want to jump to the conclusion. So at least if you just want to wait for the conclusion, you know it came from some scientific thinking. So first thing that's really important to do is continue with healthy eating. It's valuable. It's important for other aspects of health. So it's important with or without the medication. So it's worth practicing it in the meantime. And then I want to talk to you about what's called the ileal break. Now, I've discussed this before when we talked about combating weight regain in a previous session, and I want to reiterate it now. Now, the word break is used to indicate that something triggers a slowing down here. In fact, there's actually multiple sites of breaks along the gastrointestinal tract. We could say there's a gastric break, a duodenal break, there's the ileal break, there's a colonic break. So there's lots of opportunities in our digestive tract to trigger little messages that influences how we feel, and also triggers the body to do something differently with respect to digestion or the production of insulin ready for this food. Now, when you get distension in your ileum, which is the last part of your small intestine, or you get protein, fat, or carbohydrates sensed, or a change in the pH, that triggers the release of hormones. Not just GLP-1, which now you're perhaps familiar with the name of, but we will focus on that one because that's the one you've got in mind. And if you're trying to avoid the medications or get the same effect or as much of an effect as you can without the medication, then this would be a reasonable discussion. So you get the release of hormones. You also get the triggering of a nerve to send messages about the arrival of food. Another way to get GLP-1 released is via the gut bacteria, and it's dependent on what you eat. The bacteria eat fiber or polyphenols, and they produce substances that trigger the release of more GLP-1. So GLP-1, or our own natural GLP-1, is released at the end of the ileum. The release slows down the movement through the GI tract. It communicates with our pancreas about insulin, and it makes us feel satisfied. And the best thing about this is that the ability to repeatedly trigger this never wears off. You know, like some drug effects wear off. For some reason, after a year on the medications, you don't keep losing weight, you know, which is, we don't want you to keep losing weight necessarily, but because we don't want you to disappear. But why does it stop then? Let's just take a quick look at the digestive tract and just understand this a little bit more. So on the left, you can see the more accurate setup of the intestine. You've got your small intestine in the middle, and it joins onto the large intestine, which is also called the large bowel or the colon. The join of the ileum to the large intestine is in that lower left corner as we're looking at the diagram, right where the appendix is. Then if you look at the simpler diagram on the right, you can see the mouth down the esophagus to the stomach, and then the small intestine is represented by those loops, and then we're into the large intestine. So the small intestine has 3 areas. The one closest to the stomach is called the duodenum, and then we've got the jejunum in the middle, and then the last part as it joins onto the large intestine is called the ileum. The small intestine is actually where most of our food digestion and absorption occurs. So usually by the time we get to the ileum, all that's really left is the indigestible things. Now, when we talk about gut bacteria, there's almost none in your stomach. There's some in your mouth, different ones. Nothing in your stomach because the gastric acid kills them. Then as we continue to go down the small intestine, we start to get more, and then most of them are in the large intestine. So the large intestine is usually where we're talking about gut bacteria, but there's also some in that last part of the small intestine. There are about 8 or so non-gut hormones, or actually probably more than that, that send signals to say that you're satisfied. So, for example, stretch receptors in your stomach are sensed by a major nerve, which decreases the production of ghrelin. So before you ate, you might have had stomach rumbling. That came from ghrelin. You put some food in there that creates a bit of stretching of your stomach. That triggers a message through that nerve that says, oh, stop producing ghrelin, and you no longer feel hungry. Amazing. When some food makes it into the intestine, and some of that's happening actually whilst you're still eating your meals, some of it's arriving in your intestine, the duodenum starts releasing a set of hormones that slows down the emptying of the stomach, and it releases some hormones to reduce your appetite, to say it's about time to stop. If we consider the interest in GLP-1, let's just trace what we know about that and see what we can do to produce more naturally. Okay, so we're in the end of your intestine, in the ileum. Food has actually taken about 6 to 8 hours to get here. So this is not what stops you eating, but it's what tones down your appetite generally. Most of the food, by the time it gets to the ileum, has been digested and absorbed further up. So what we've got arriving here is the remnants of the meal. So there'll be different types of fibre, and there will be some plant-based chemicals. There might also be some food additives and anything else that we've consumed that is not actually absorbed, that we don't have a mechanism to absorb. There will be some good plant-based chemicals, like polyphenols, for example. There'll also be some remnants of fat, carbs, or protein that possibly didn't get digested further up. That perhaps varies depending on the food. Any fermentable fibre, which we could also refer to as prebiotic fibre, well, it's technically prebiotic fibre if it's fermented and produces a health benefit. So, for example, pectin in apples or beta-glucan in oats would arrive in the ileum. It could also come from a fibre supplement, but all of those will be consumed by beneficial bacteria, and those bacteria will produce some gas plus some other substances, and those substances can trigger the release of GLP-1. So a healthy gut is important for normal and optimal appetite and weight control. And one of the reasons why the population may be gaining weight is because there are things that are affecting our gut bacteria and we don't have that healthy production, so we're not producing enough GLP-1. That's one possibility. You've also got non-fermentable fibre and other bits of the undigested food, and they create some bulk for distension. So insoluble fibre, for example, is creating some bulk, and that directly triggers the release of GLP-1 as well. So we've got those two mechanisms down in the ileum to release GLP-1. So the simple conclusion to what we need is certainly that dietary fibre. So high fibre foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes and nuts are known to stimulate the ileal break or the release of GLP-1. Fibre adds bulk to the intestinal contents, which can delay gastric emptying. It can prolong the transit time through the small intestine, leading to increased activation of this ileal break. There's actually evidence that on a high fibre diet, which would be 25 grams of fibre or more for most people, 25 to 30, or 17 grams of fibre if you've had bariatric surgery, and are still maintaining a limited intake. Fiber carries nutrients out of the body, and it's been estimated that a high fiber diet actually makes you malabsorb 10% of the calories that you ate. So that's how we get some fat and carbohydrate arriving in the ileum to get more GLP-1. We just need a high fiber meal. We need a high fiber daily intake of greater than 25 grams of fiber per day to achieve what we want. Now, the real food there refers to natural foods, particularly plant foods, because they support the gut bacteria or the growth of the gut bacteria or the thriving of the gut bacteria. And they have to be there to be able to consume the fiber that arrives there to produce the GLP-1 down their pathway. There's also substances in food, in kind of non-real food or very processed, ultra-processed foods, like emulsifiers, for example, that could be damaging the gut bacteria. And so that is automatically going to reduce your ability to produce natural GLP-1. Interestingly, research suggests that people who are at a high body weight do have lower production of GLP-1, and that it's not the high body weight that results in the lower production of GLP-1, but that it was the lowering of GLP-1 which came before the weight gain. Now, I don't see much more about that in the research, but we've talked before about obesogens, so chemicals in our environment and potentially in our food, in our makeup, that interfere with our own body's hormonal systems. And probably that's what's happening globally, because these chemicals are found in everybody. Whether you live in a civilized society or you live out alone somewhere in the desert, everybody has some of these chemicals. BPA, which you will have heard of in plastics, is pretty much across the board. So we want fiber, we want real food, and we want to avoid obesogens wherever is possible for us, but we really need some global authorities stepping in to protect us from obesogens. So let's come back to fiber, because I think that is our best option here. The average fiber intake in Australia is about 20 grams per day, and in the US, it's 15 grams per day. Recommended is 25 to 30 grams per day, as I said previously, for women and men respectively. There are different types of fiber, and they're all worthwhile. There's insoluble fiber like wheat bran, which adds bulk, and we saw that distension helped to trigger GLP-1. There's resistant starch, which is fermentable. You'll find that in brown rice, legumes, whole grain bread and pasta, quinoa, cashews, lentils, green bananas, oats and potatoes. There's soluble fiber, which can be fermentable or non-fermentable, and that might be pectin and the beta-glucan, guar gum, a variety of different fibers. They're also great for improving blood glucose levels. And it's perhaps a conversation for a different presentation to talk a bit more about fiber. But all fiber helps to carry nutrients to the ileum. All fiber helps you to create distension, and some fibers help to feed the gut bacteria. So fiber is the strongest thing you can do whilst you're not taking these drugs. I wanted to put forward a great way to increase your prebiotic fiber intake, and that is through the use of chia seeds. You know, they're a great source of omega-3, of protein and low GI carbs, and both soluble and insoluble fiber. They're a pretty popular ingredient today, and they can appear in chia puddings, smoothies, overnight oats, or energy balls. So I've put together some recipes to help you. So if you don't have a Portion Perfection kit, just head to the website to purchase And any purchase over $50 of Portion Perfection products will get you the free Chia recipe book with the coupon code CHIA, CHIA. So you can get that kit on our own websites. You can't get the kit perfectly on Amazon, but if you purchase a bundle or a kit including those products on Amazon, you can just send us an email, give us your purchase number, and we'll send you the recipe book. I will look at ways to attach it on there permanently. So, where does bariatric surgery fit in? Well, the medical treatment algorithm guides doctors towards bariatric surgery where BMI is over 40, 35 to 40 with comorbidities, or 30 to 35 with poorly controlled type 2 diabetes. Anti-obesity medications are indicated for BMI over 30 or over 27 with comorbidities. Now, if you're not sure what your BMI is, just Google BMI calculator and you'll find lots of them. They're often being used in combination with bariatric surgery now. And, you know, with the introduction of anti-obesity medications, we've been seeing a decrease in bariatric surgery whilst people test out the medications. But a lot of people are not continuing with the medications for a variety of reasons, supply currently being one of them, but they still want to address the problem, and so they're going for bariatric surgery, which is up to the surgeon to identify whether that's an appropriate step. But many people are being prescribed a combination. I'm part of a professional discussion group, and there's certainly surgeons in there saying that they're already using a combination of surgery and medication from the very beginning to aim to get the maximum weight loss for during that weight loss period, because both bariatric surgery and the medications have a tapering off period. So the question is, are you better off to introduce one later and get a second drop, or do you get a bigger drop at the beginning? I have no idea. Sometimes bariatric surgery aims to avoid medication. And there's a longer history of study of bariatric surgery, so we know that it's relatively safe, but certainly it involves surgery. Bariatric surgery actually impacts the gut hormones directly as well, and some of it's not even yet fully understood, but GLP-1 is certainly one of the hormones that increases following surgery. And the increase was equal between sleeve and bypass at 3 months post-surgery, though it was greater straight after surgery for bypass than sleeve. And this effect seemed to have reduced significantly by 2 years post-surgery. And really, we need more research in this area, but the addition of the anti-obesity medication seems to restore some of the early effects of the surgery. Certainly, GLP-1 is also likely to be part of the reason that gastric bypass can resolve a high proportion of cases of type 2 diabetes straight after surgery. Because it's straight after surgery, like on the day of surgery, it's not related to weight loss because the weight loss hasn't happened yet. It's something to do with the surgery. And it may be to do with the bypassed portion of the intestine, meaning that nutrients are reaching the end of the intestine earlier and triggering that release of insulin earlier or sooner. And it's also triggering an increase in the cells that produce insulin. So it has beneficial effects on the pancreas. So with that release of GLP-1, you get a reduction in blood glucose level, a better ability to mobilize fat, and it curbs your appetite. It may also change the composition of the microbiome. There's some research looking at that as well. And as we've seen, the microbiome can have some impact on the release of satisfaction hormones itself. I did invite questions in the lead up to this session. So let's have a look at those questions. The first one was when to take Ozempic. And I think that question was implying should it be with a meal, or, how do I get it to control my cravings the best? Or with Ozempic being a weekly injection, it doesn't matter. It's having more of a longer term effect. It's not specifically affecting what you eat at the next meal. How to combat plateau? Well, we don't really know at this point, but there's likely a benefit from increasing your muscle mass, because muscle is responsible for how many calories you're burning. You've seen that there's more drugs in the pipeline. Some of them are going to include some way to stop the breakdown of GLP-1s. Certainly, they'll be looking for greater weight losses for certain people, so that potentially the doctors can just vary the dose to get the effect that's needed. A question about foods to target visceral fat loss. Well, you will lose visceral fat with weight loss generally, and that's one of the things that we measure in clinic with our body composition analyzer. We know that exercise is great for reducing visceral fat. Low carb can be quite effective, even using low carb intermittently so that you don't damage your fiber opportunity. I would only use it for a short time for that reason, because we want as great a diversity of plant-based foods, and a lot of them contain carbohydrate. How to stop diarrhea? Well, the gastro seems to happen in about 8% of people on Ozempic. It's more of a problem on the higher dose of Wegovy. Some of that may actually be caused by primary constipation, and it's the body's attempt to try and get rid of the constipation to create some diarrhea higher up. Some of that diarrhea might be getting past the constipation. You might still be impacted and having some liquid stool getting past. So you can talk to your doctor about whether or not that's likely to be happening. But otherwise, the soluble fiber is good at helping that, decreasing alcohol, decreasing caffeine, sometimes avoiding milk as well. If things are moving quite quickly through your intestine, you may not have a good lactose digestibility, which can cause problems. How long does it take to see progress? I would say we see progress in the first 2 weeks, certainly the first 4 weeks. Foods to avoid, ultra-processed foods, and it's more what to include. How much protein? Well, at least 1.1 grams per kilogram ideal body weight. I think you don't want to go too high, because it starts to impact your ability to eat some of those other foods. How to eat when not hungry? Well, choosing small enough, often being structured so your body can actually develop the routine. And with routine, your body will start to work with you, and it'll create an appetite, a small appetite at your regular meal times. There was also a question about reactive hypoglycemia, and I'm going to put this into the medical realm, because certainly overproduction of GLP-1 can be associated with reactive hypoglycemia generally and after bariatric surgery. So anti-obesity medications may not be a good idea if you suffer from reactive hypoglycemia, but I'm not an expert on that. I haven't seen enough of it to be able to comment. Do we need vitamin supplements? Well, your requirement would really be based on need. So whether you're meeting your dietary needs or not, a general multi may be of benefit, particularly if you're really noticing that your appetite is down. Question about the ideal macro percentage. Well, I would just focus on the protein amount and high fiber natural foods. The rest is likely to fall into place. And in terms of a meal plan, can I give you a meal plan? Well, that's exactly what you'll find in the 4-week weight loss menu plan, which we saw on one of those pictures of the kits. So if you don't have it, follow the URLs that you'll find around this video. And don't forget to get your free chia recipe book using that code chia when you spend over $50. So in summary, there's some very promising developments in the battle to control global weight gain. It's currently a waiting game for supplies, but they will get here. A healthy diet is required, with or without the meds, so it's a good place to focus for now. Pay special attention to fiber. There was a dietary plan years ago called the F plan, which was very popular. maybe in the 70s. Then people started to feel that was a bit old-fashioned, but this is probably why it was so good. We're here to help. We're available for consultations, portion control tools, recipes, and meal plans. We've got you covered for all of that. There's the links to our websites and to Amazon in the US. You'll find us on Facebook or Instagram as Portion Perfection. We're also there as Beyond Bariatric Surgery for those who have had bariatric surgery. We've got private groups under different names, which you'll find if you go to the Facebook pages first. That image is from the top line in the weight loss section of our Australian website, greatideas.net.au, and really covers the main things. So first product there is that starter kit with the 2 educational sessions, the plate and bowl, and the 2 books, which you can get either as printed or ebooks, and melamine or porcelain. The accountability starter pack is a visit plus a basic kit. If you prefer to hear things straight from the dietitian and have things individualized, follow-up consultations are for after the initial consultation. It just gives you a discount on telehealth or in-person consultations with the dietitians. And we also have a custom meal plan service where, based on some particular your answers to our questions, we can put together a 7-day meal plan with recipes for you, or you can access a generalized one and access our database to be able to plan your own menus. So see what works for you. I hope you found this useful, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.